especially if you're doing a long-term effort like Benson guys are doing right now at that wonderful charter school in East Hawaii. And then finally, I think rolling up your sleeves, getting dirty, serving others is a crucial part of leadership. Anybody who caught a little bit of the celebration of life for Colin Powell heard a lot about that. So those are some of the things I think I just want to share through stories of some leaders. I quickly put together some PowerPoints. Apologies for some of the visuals of these slides, but you know who I'm talking about here. Dwayne Carisu is the first leader that I just want to hold up. Business leader, real estate development, but for the East Hawaii gang, is a Hilo boy, right? So he brings in that humility of service. But basically what I want to lift up in what I've learned from him, particularly in Kahawiki Village, is he had built a lifetime of relationships of trust with all sorts of people. So when he took this Sand Island space and with Lloyd Sueda and Mel Kaneshige, past president of our club, sort of sketched on a map what might be able to be done to cut in half family homelessness on the island of Oahu. He had all those relationships. So people stepped up and they said, how can I help? What can I do? And so he built in 6 months what would take 4 years. And he'd be the first to say it's not him, it's everybody. And Rotary really stepped up big time for this. But I think that Dwayne's really secret sauce was the web of relationships that he built over the years. And so we trusted him. When he created this palette for us all to paint, we all just jumped in because we had that trust and we had those relationships. And let me just share, obviously Dwayne was trusted also because he got things done. So when he said, I'm going to do this, let's do it together, we knew it could get done despite all of the odds. So lifting up and remembering Dwayne and thinking about all the good that he's continuing to do for our community. Second, Nainoa Thompson. I think Nainoa demonstrates so well the vision and the heart that you need in order to lead a set of volunteers. I remember one day, it was probably about 10 years ago, I was at Sand Island near Kahawiki Village. There's an arm of Honolulu Community College there where young people are taught boat building and marine engineering skills. And in that building, there's space for Polynesian Voyaging Society to have its staff and its offices. And Nainoa stood up in front of this group and he basically laid out the vision for the worldwide sail. He pulled down a huge map of the world. He got a pointer and he said, Hokulea is going to sail around the world. It's going to be X million miles. It's going to be X number of stops. And here's why we're doing it, because the earth needs healing and Hawaii needs to connect with the whole earth and everybody who's healing the earth. And we need to bring that back to our own islands to take care of our islands. So we want to share the essence of aloha. We want to learn along the way and bring that essence of our learnings back to Hawaii. It was hugely audacious. And I remember talking to a few people in the room after Nainoa spoke for about 10 minutes and wondering, how are we ever going to pull this off? But the point is that Nainoa set that goal. And so the argument later on was just how we get to that goal. Just like Rotary, how many years ago was it? 20, 30 years ago, where we said there are 300,000 people a year dying of polio. We're going to cut that down to 0. And we're going to do whatever it takes to get to that point. So I think Rotary has this element of visionary leadership in it. The other thing about Nainoa, and you've all heard him speak, he so speaks in a vulnerable way with his heart. And you can share how worried he is about the future for Hawaii and the world, how much he loves it, and how much he brings his father into the picture and his late best friend, Lacey Beach. So vision and heart are such an important element of all the leadership that we do in our different Rotary clubs and as a district and around the globe. Third person I want to bring into this room is someone who passed away last month, named Dinky Soleiman. And when I was working at the Ford Foundation in the Philippines on human rights, social justice, poverty alleviation issues, Dinky was a towering figure of leadership for me. By the way, Dinky towered maybe on her tiptoes at 4'9". So that's why she's got this nickname of Dinky. At the time, she was a nonprofit leader of a federation of landless farmers groups. And a lot of the poverty in the Philippines and rural areas is related to the fact that people don't own their parcel of land that they're working. So they only get a small amount of the income from that land they work. The rest of it goes to the landlord. So Dinky called me up one morning and she said, "Terry, we got to meet for lunch today. Are you free? Come on up." So I went over to a restaurant and met with Dinky, and she was just, I don't know what you would call it, not seething, but so there's a positive, enthusiastic, burning with excitement. She said, "Terry, I just came back from this 10-day training that the UN brought using this Harvard negotiations project thing called Getting to Yes. And if you guys have heard of that, it's a way to negotiate win-wins as opposed to zero-sum negotiations." And she said, "Terry, I think we could use this so that these landless farmers have tools where they can negotiate win-win solutions with the landlords." And because I had this relationship of trust with Dinky, I'd seen what she'd done. So again, bringing Dwayne Carisu's essence of leadership into the room again. I said, "Okay, Dinky, I trust you." But I was skeptical, just like people were skeptical in that room with Nainoa when he sketched out this wild idea of sailing around the world. So we, at Ford Foundation, we had a little bit of money left. We gave Dinky's group a $20,000 grant. They translated the essence of the Getting to Yes negotiations strategy into 4 Filipino languages. They did videotaping before and after trainings on how people could role play and negotiate with landlords. And lo and behold, about a year later, Dinky comes to me and she says, "Terry, there's a group on the poorest big island of the large island of the Philippines called Samar. They've been trying for 30 years to get the landlord to sell their agricultural land to the farmers. It happened. The landlord's heart was moved because the farmers understood what the landlord needed." So in this case, Dinky had the good idea, but they also did excellent planning and execution in these different languages with role playing, iterative training, a handbook that they translated into those languages so people actually used it. So I think good leadership of volunteers and others really also is about good planning and execution, those nuts and bolts I talked about. Next, I want to bring into the room an unusual leader many of you might not know of, but you've certainly seen the impact of the Weinberg Foundation around Hawaii. It's headquartered in Baltimore. It works in Israel, Baltimore, Hawaii, and a few other places on issues related to housing, workforce development, education, health. And I got to know Rachel because the Weinberg Foundation each year invites a small group of leaders from Hawaii and Baltimore to go to Israel. And so we went to Israel for about 10 days, toured the whole country, including the West Bank, the edge of Gaza Strip, and we learned a lot about that country. There are a group of about 30 of us. There are about 10 Weinberg staff who are also there helping to staff the trip and themselves learning. And I learned about Rachel's essence of leadership. One evening, before dinner, she had hand-selected and hand-wrapped a present for each one of the staff that were there. And these were not all of her senior staff. These were people who are doing the nuts and bolts of work in this huge $2 billion foundation. And before everyone and all of these leader guests of the trip, Rachel spoke about each of those people's essence of what they contributed to the foundation. And then she gave them a gift that was reflective of the essence of what they brought of themselves to the foundation's work. And I can tell you, looking around at the body language of those 10 people who received these individualized gifts, they would walk through fire for Rachel. What she was good at is this element of leadership that we need to remember as leaders, is be sure to celebrate along the way and be the encourager in chief, but not just good job and that's it. Let's be specific about specifically what people are contributing along the way. So personalize that. Here's why I love what you just did at Centennial Park. For example, I love the way that you organize your small team to pick those weeds. And that's just an example of the encouragement that we all do as leaders. The final set of leaders is represented by this photo. I was really just going to talk with you about my friend Earl Kim, who is now the head of Les Jardins Academy. But I decided to show this picture of my other friends and grassroots leaders, Gary Mauna Kea IV, from Ma'o Farms, and Ed Kenny, who is a celebrated chef, social entrepreneur. That's a photo of Ed and his family with Gary. And it represents that we got to get in there, roll up our sleeves, and work with our troops. Earl and I did a month-long hike of the John Muir Trail this summer with my son and my brother. And I got to know more about Earl. Earl decided to go from Iolani School to Cornell University to be a mechanical engineer and a historian. But instead of going into engineering, probably to the great worry of his parents, he joined the Marines instead. And I said, why did you join the Marines? And he said, because they have the best leadership development there is. And Earl, if you've ever met him, he's been an unbelievable leader as a superintendent of public school districts on the East Coast, as head of the Kapalama campus of Kamehameha Schools, and now at Les Jardins Academy in Kailua. And I noticed that he didn't have a problem carrying his backpack as we're hiking up and down these 12,000 foot peaks. I said, how come it's so easy for you to do this? He said, because I was carrying 80-pound backpacks as a Marine. I said, how come it was so heavy? He said, because we as officers carried a lot of the munitions for our troops. So we made sure their backpacks were lighter than ours. And he also said that officers were always last to go through the food line. They made sure all of their troops went in first. So he taught me a lot about servant leadership. And Gary and Ed certainly have done the same thing, where Ed doesn't just buy produce from Ma'o Farms. He has developed a relationship with them, and he goes there, he brings his family, he plants there, and he serves as a volunteer when they have meals for guests. And Gary, if you shake his hand, it's all calloused up and hard and the dirt behind the fingernails. So he doesn't just lead conceptually, but he leads as a servant leader. So really, I just wanted to end again with this story, or this photo that I had at the beginning of these little kids. And it just inspires me, because this is what we're all doing, is building a better future for Hawaii. And again, I just want to reiterate some of the things that I've learned along the way as a leader, and hope that I did a little bit at Rotary when I was president, and as I continue to be a Rotarian with all of you. You know, stay positive, kind, calm under pressure, and persistent. I think a lot of us do that well. And then that builds those relationships of trust. Be sure to paint a picture of success, what that promised land looks at when Benson, you guys get that roof done and that school is strong again, rising out of the ashes of the lava flow. Plan well so your followers know you're clear on where we're headed. Execute well the way Dinky Soleiman did. Let's break our big jobs into small parts so that people have a sense of accomplishment along the way. Use that golden rule to treat others the way you would like to be treated, as Dwayne Carisu has done so well. Humble leader, because those relationships, that well of trust that we've built, are things that we can call upon later. So when Gwen, our current president of our Rotary Club, calls me up and says, Terry, can you help me with something? Of course I'm going to do it, because I trust her. She's treated me with kindness, generosity, and humility along the way. Let's be that encourager in chief of people, but make it specific and personalized, because that kind of feeds their their well of feeling good about themselves and understanding what you are as a leader to encourage them. And then finally, get in there, get your hands dirty, work along with your troops the way Benson is doing, fighting all the mosquitoes right now. He's serving us anyway. And he's also serving this special school and all the Rotarians. So I just wanted to share those to start a conversation, Benson and everybody, and happy to hear what your essences of leadership have been and tell more stories along the way. But I think that Rotary is just an amazing place where there are hundreds and hundreds of leaders here in Hawaii, and we all have our own style. So just wanted to mahalo you for the opportunities to share some ideas, and looking forward to people's reactions, reflections, questions, ideas. Mahalo.
Hey, thanks, Terry. I appreciate that. So if anybody's got any questions or comments, just go ahead and unmute yourself, and we'll get you in the conversation. So anybody, or a couple. Gwen had a comment in the chat, said, you know, nice job, and I'm gonna when this is over, I'm gonna actually play a little YouTube video that sort of just dovetails right into what Terry was saying. Is that, man, you got to get in there and you got to do some work. So Kelly, I see you got your hand up, so go ahead and unmute yourself and rock and roll.
Thanks so much, Terry. I appreciate the overview this morning and some weekend inspiration. One of the things that it seems to me that I've experienced over time, both as a leader and as you know, someone being led in different organizations, the ability of a leader to express vulnerability. It doesn't this myth of the invulnerable or the venerant leader doesn't ascribes to a much older theory of kind of power-based, you know, authority rather than you know, kind of an authenticity in leadership. And the times where I've had some breakthrough moments with my staff and my club is when I share both kind of those vulnerabilities and those opportunities to really engage in, you know, in an authentic conversation about how.
Kelly, I totally agree with you. I'm thinking of Colin Powell and how he readily admitted when he was wrong, and that's so important. I think of, you know, an essence of leadership is not instructing people to do something, but really saying, I need your help. I can't, there's some things that I can't do very well. And would you stand alongside me and bring what you're good at to step forward? I think another thing is that when things are going wrong or they're tough, I like to find a trusted person to be vulnerable with. You know, in Rotary, you know, it's tough to be a leader in Rotary sometimes, because it's there've been, imagine how many challenges there've been. Rich, Gwen, you know, our immediate past president, our current president, and all of you who led Rotary through the pandemic, you know, just figuring out how do we keep everybody together and maintain those relationships when we can't see each other. So you're so right. Vulnerability is critical. I will tell you one last thing with my staff. What I've started to do in check-ins with them and setting goals is I say, tell me 3 things. In my one-on-ones, I do this with my staff. Tell me first, let's lead off with 3 things I need to do better or I need to improve upon. We start that conversation with them telling me what I need to do better, and then I darn well better follow up. And then it makes it a lot easier for us to have a conversation about what they'd like to improve on.
Okay, Barry, I see you're got your hand up. Barry, go ahead. Thanks, thanks, Kelly. That was a great question.
Yeah, I just wanted to make a few remarks in terms of what you spoke about this morning, particularly as it relates to building trust. And that's something that I've always strived to do. I consider myself a people person, but some people may not think so every now and then. But relationships in general, building those relationships, that's always the foundation of building any trust. And your words and remarks are poignant in the fact that I'd seen or I just saw a video last night from Simon Sinek, and he was talking about leading with empathy. And it really touched on, you know, the whole trust and relationships he gave a couple of examples of boss going into the office of one of his employees and talking about, say, for example, their fourth quarter earnings. And they weren't so good. So the boss is like, you know, if your earnings don't get any better, you know, I don't know how this is going to end for you, you know, as opposed to going in and saying, you know, hey, your fourth quarter earnings weren't that good. You know, is everything okay? You know, is everything all right at home? Particularly as we, you know, lead through the pandemic that we're leading through now, but having that empathy. Everybody has a story, and being aware and being cognizant of that, and you know, taking that in consideration instead of looking at the surface of everything, I think will also help improve those relationships within the club.
Barry, I can't agree with you more. I mean, that empathetic leadership is critical going forward. And just getting a sense of what's going on with people, what's happening. It's hard sometimes because you can't, not everybody's willing to share right away. So what I love about Rotary, Barry, is, you know, when we roll up our sleeves, we build buildings, we paint together, we break bread together. It creates space for there to be vulnerability and one-on-one conversations that are so important. Especially at this time where everything's stressed. What I've started to do, I run a grant making foundation. We have dozens and dozens of nonprofit organizations and schools and system leaders that we support. I'll often start with a call with saying, how bad is it right now for you? What are you going through right now? So I don't let them not talk about what's going on. And they love feeling heard, and that's so important. So Barry, you said you don't know if you're a people person. It's obvious to all of us on this call, you sure are.
Thanks, Barry. Barry's a great one. Sonia, you have a question, go for it.
I'd like to make a comment that what inspires me when I look to a leader is the openness and the flexibility to new ideas, and letting younger members that Rotary is trying to engage right now in membership, letting them take the ball and run with it. Even if the club has done it this way for years and years. You know, I think leaders that have been in Rotary for a long time also need to just trust and just let go of what they know how to do, and just give that freedom and the gift to produce and be successful to our younger members. You know, I think a lot of times that's the hardest thing for a club that's always done it this way, to just let that idea go, and let somebody who's young and encouraging and filled with ideas, just let them go for it, you know, because that's what makes younger people stay in Rotary as well.
It's so true, Sonia. And my example with Dinky Soleiman was a good example. I didn't think this strategy was going to work, but she did. That was the more important thing. And she was so committed to and passionate about it that I didn't see any risk at all in letting that effort be experimented with. And it had profound results. And we could each talk about that in our clubs a lot more. How do we create space for innovative ideas? So whether or not we can start to become incubators of new ways to solve problems. You're so right, Sonia. Our club, Gwen, Rich, you know, others who might be on, and many of our clubs have leaders who are baby boomers, for example, or just below that. And we need to create explicitly as leaders space for our new members, our young members, to step up and lead now. I hire staff, and when I hire my own staff in my own organization, I say, you're expected to lead now, and not always to ask permission either. I need you to lead now and not to wait. So if we can infuse that more within Rotary, Sonia, yeah, we will be thriving for many years to come.
Thanks, Sonia. That's great. Alan from Hilo Bay, go for it, Alan.
Hey, good morning, Terry. This is Alan Okinaka. I'm with the Rotary Club of Hilo Bay. I've served in many so-called leadership roles in a company. But one of the things that I've noticed over the years is that there's 80% of any organization, large and medium size, which are the people that go to work on time. They want to do a good job. They want to make sure their family have a good vacation every year, possibly buy a nice car, be able to travel here and there. But they don't aspire to be leaders of an organization. They just want to provide well for their family. And the problem is that often, because in a large corporation, I've interacted a lot with the human resources people, there's a slight stigmatization of people that are followers. And it rubbed me the wrong way. It just irritated me because they're the people that really are the backbone of the company. They're the ones who really make things happen. And so I call them solid citizens. They're the ones that make things happen. And I tried personally different ways of recognizing the fact that followers are important, that they are the people that we need to pay attention to, and not just, a lot of platitudes, right? You say, well, if you're an inspiring leader, everybody will follow you. If you're charismatic, everybody will follow you, things like this. And I think we need to pay attention to the people that are the backbone of an organization. People that don't aspire to be leaders, they're important. They're very, very important to any program, project, or anything that we may have. So I wanted to throw that in. It's something I've been kicking around for a while now, and I haven't come up with a good way, except I think the only thing that maybe touched upon that was to define what good leaders are, by saying that a good leader doesn't mean that they do good things. You can have a good leader that does bad things too. Yeah. And in doing that, you can you pay attention more to the people that follow these leaders and have the courage and knowledge and experience to question the direction that organization is going into. So anyway, my thoughts on this subject. Thank you.
Alan, agree 100%. I think about John Komeiji when he was brought into Hawaiian Telecom to help revive it. Remember when it was kind of taken over by a mainland outside investor, and they were losing business. They had a call center located outside of Hawaii, and John came in supposedly, I think, as their kind of chief legal counsel, but he told me he went to every office of Hawaiian Telecom around the state, and he went down to those followers, Alan. He said, what's wrong with what we're doing at the top? And what do we need to do to fix it? And of course, those were the salt of the earth people who kept things going, right? And they knew exactly what was wrong. Hey, Susie, how's it going? How's the school? So Susie's one of the leaders that I admire as well. Somebody who embodies everything I've been talking about. And imagine what her school has gone through, right? So, and the way you used relationships with Rotary to keep the school going, serve all your kids, and give them brighter futures and love. So you're amazing. You're also on mute though.
Yeah, go for it.
I said thank you so much from the bottom of my heart, and really it's not me. Rotary's the amazing one. And today we continue this journey of stabilizing the school by creating learning environments for the students, especially as a Hawaiian-focused charter school. We need our emu and our planting. We just learned something amazing about planting tea or ava or any plants. You don't need root tone. You get aloe vera, and then you just cut your bottom of your plant, you wipe the aloe on it and plant it, and boom, she goes. So We all are lifelong learners. We've got 3 teams. We're cranking it, and the end result and goal will be to bring our East Hawaii Rotary clubs together. And when we have one more work session on December 4th to finish the EMU, then we'll put the EMU in, bring all of us together and celebrate and say mahalo to all of us. So that's the goal, the vision. You're all invited, and see you soon. And thanks to this guy.
Always the promoter. Yeah.
I love
Make
it.
it happen for everybody. It's uplifting our community, right? So and this is for everybody. So thank you guys, and I really wanted to be at this training. I blew it by scheduling today.
That's okay.
Okay.
We're recording. We're recording.
Okay, shoot.
All right, go for it. Sorry to interrupt.
Yes, can we get her to be a speaker? I've never heard of that before.
Oh, okay. Well, I'll get you some information on it. Yeah.
I never heard of that. You put aloe vera on the bottom of a cutting?
Just I think they just figured out. So I mean it's been there for like a million years, but we just discovered it. So anyway. So go ahead. Sorry, Terry. Sorry to interrupt you, but yeah, go for it. Rick, I think you had a question.
Yeah, kind of a question and a statement. Can you hear me? So in the military, when I first joined the military, I was a Navy hospital corpsman, field med, so we're out in the field kind of thing. We'd come up with ideas of things that maybe we could do, and they would say, no, we don't do it that way. We've always done it this way. So the first thing I learned about leadership was listen, and just hear what the idea is. Don't get stuck, because just like she just mentioned there, always learning. There's always great ideas. Not just from younger, but from older as well. I mean, I'm in a whole ageless kind of world here with my Kapuna work. And man, you can learn a lot listening to all sides of things. The other, mental health is my background. And so I love your principles there. My basic, simplest one is honesty, trust, respect.
Yeah.
I mean, so if a leader is honest and you find that you can trust them, you're going to respect them and you'll follow them, to the end of the world, right? And then this Rotary, just being in Rotary, I've never met a Rotarian that isn't a leader. I mean, it's just what we are. And so it's just a remarkable group. So Terry, thank you for sharing all of your information. Really appreciate it.
Thanks, Rick, and thanks for your mana'o. I was in a leadership training program in Hawaii, and one of the things that I remember from it was do what you say you will do. So one of the ways you build trust is listen, and then make commitments, make promises that you are sure that you're going to follow through on. So even if the promises start small, you can build trust and then grow from there. And I think there's a reason some other leader told me that we have 2 ears and 1 mouth. So one of the things I aspire to do, and I don't always succeed with, is I go into a meeting with the desire to make sure that I am speaking less than half the time that I'm listening. And when I do speak, I try to ask for probe for understanding, use questions to better understand, or I will reflect back to people, here's what I think I heard from you. Is this right? Is this the essence of what we've talked about? If people feel heard, it just comes back to you in spades in good ways as a leader.
Yeah, they're listening if they're asking questions. They can paraphrase what you said. They're asking questions, and the conversation's moving forward. Yeah, very important. The other is there's to any problem, there's a solution. It might not exactly be what you think it's going to be, but there are solutions and it may take steps. And so being able to recognize that, you'd mentioned being able to hand things off and just let people do what they do with it. As long as, you get to the same point that's needed, it's all good.
Yeah. And just to riff off that, Benson, if I might, what Rick just shared, there was Patty Lyons, also Rotarian. She was the one who brought me back from the Philippines so I could marry my wife, start a family here. Tired of having a long distance relationship with my wife, Julie, who teaches at Kamehameha schools. So one of the things Patty told me, she sat me down and said, Terry, here's how I like my organization to work. I want to hear what's wrong. I definitely, you tell me when things are going badly. I like that. Don't be afraid of telling me. But when you tell me what's going wrong and what a problem is, bring some solution suggestions too. So if you have a problem, bring a solution. And we've all been in our Rotary Club sometimes where someone's upset with something. And I've often found that to be a useful thing, saying, I agree it's a problem. What are your solutions? What are your suggestions of how do we solve that? And that can turn bitterness and anger into someone who becomes a little bit more of a positive problem solver. Not always, but sometimes.
Okay, any more questions for Terry?
I've got
Questions,
a
comments?
couple of comments, Benson.
Okay, go for it.
Number one is in terms of, Terry, that was an excellent presentation. Obviously from the heart, because you can tell when somebody's speaking from their heart. In terms of the leadership, the planning and execution, I'm just going through some points that I made here are critically important. It's kind of like the basis, the foundation of what you're doing. And without that, then everything just kind of is in disarray. The second thing, which is, excuse me, my background is a lot of it's program management and breaking it, military projects mostly. Breaking projects into chunks, what I call chunks or work projects, which can be worked on. And then once that's successful, it provides the motivation to go on to the second segment, the third segment, the fourth segment till the project is completed. It's a lot better looking at it that way than looking at an enormous project and people scratching their heads and saying, my goodness, are we going to be able to do this? So you do it chunk by chunk. The leadership, one of the other things that I've learned too is there are various forms of leadership too, in terms of what the kind of project that you're working on. So you respond to, depending on the situation. There are situations where you're going to have to put your foot down and say, this is what we're going to have to do, period. And that followed by an explanation of why you're doing that. And then at other times, more times you would get consensus from the organization. United States Marine Corps, I was an officer in the Marine Corps, so I understood what was going on there too. So silence is breaking the silence is a skill. A lot of people don't want to talk. You know, they think some good thoughts. They think they disapprove, but they're afraid to speak. So, as a leader, learning how to break that silence turns into a skill, so that you can actually understand what's going on. What Alan said, Okinaka said, is absolutely true. Without the followers are the foundation. Those people that sit there, listen, and respond. And if you're an astute leader, you can always identify through body language and et cetera that they're responding in a different way. But if we didn't have the people that did all the footwork, and the projects would not continue. I think there's an awful lot more that I could say, but I won't. But anyway, it all sounds good. It all sounds very good. Hawaii needs more leadership, not only at the worker level, but needs a lot of more work leadership at the top level. And we're lacking there, in my opinion. Thank you very much.
Great comments. I think, Benson, you might have a new speaker and trainer on leadership right there.
Yeah, that's Kurt.
There's a lot you can share, Kurt.
My Kamehameha brother over there, so no problem. Okay, yeah, hey, we got to email each other, you know.
Yeah.
So Aaron, I see you got your hand up. Go for it, Aaron.
Sure, thank you. In listening to the folks who have been sharing after Terry, and first of all, Terry, thank you very much. I hear so much of your message in the way our Teach for America Ohana works. So thank you. I know that that's coming from you. But I just wanted to kind of think about the leader and the follower aspect and wonder maybe if we might reframe that. Because everybody is a leader in a certain way, and they might not be in the position of power that we think of as a leader in the corporate sense, but that doesn't mean that they're not a leader in your company or a leader in your community. And so I might want to push us to think differently about leaders versus followers. Leaders everybody is a doer. Everybody has to lead something. And just because they're not the CEO doesn't mean that they're not leading somewhere. So I just want to throw that out there as a reminder that we can't all climb the corporate ladder, and people are happy where they are, and they're still leading from where they are.
Good points. Yeah, good
So
point.
true, Aaron. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'll tell you a quick story. There was a group of agricultural development people coming into an African village to work on improving agriculture. And it was more of a male-dominated society. And so in those kind of formal meetings, it was the men who attended the meeting. The problem is the women were doing all the farming and they weren't at the meeting. So finally it dawned upon the ag tech support people that maybe we should talk to the women. And so, you know, you're right. These labels of leader and follower need to be looked at more closely. Two things I think about in meetings in Hawaii is that, you know, you go into a table, a room full of people sitting at a table in a meeting, there are speakers who speak a lot, and then there are people who speak very little. And often what I do is wonder what those people who aren't saying anything feel. And so, as we all know, there's the meeting that you have formally, and then there's the real meeting that takes place out in the parking lot when you're leaning against the back of the truck. Be sure as a leader, you're in both meetings, and you're particularly in listening mode in that second meeting as much as you are in the first meeting.
Just one more comment here. The one thing I haven't heard mentioned, excuse me, the term, and maybe, excuse me, maybe I missed it, was mentoring, which I think is another critical part of leadership.
Yes.
Leadership actually forming, excuse me, a very strong mentorship platform. Because what you're doing there is you're preparing the organization or the unit or the project for whatever's coming down the road. That's all I have to say. Yeah.
Okay, let's take a last question from Alita, and then we'll kind of wind up this section and move on. So go ahead. Well, there's Alita and then Lila. Okay, go ahead, Alita.
Aloha, Terry. Thank you very much for this conversation, and to all of those who asked questions as well. Something that everyone had brought up, and I appreciate, is the sense of all of these sessions are grounded in like a Hawaiian concept, you know, our host culture concept. And so one of the things that we discussed at Pacific Health Ministry during Spiritual Care Week was, you know, the sense of research and paths of knowing. And I find it fascinating. And I just wanted to hear your thoughts about like there's different paths of knowing. And so I kind of see that information is also a sense of leadership and a sense of kuleana that we take responsibility for. But how do you, I guess, approach the different cultures and pathways of leadership in Hawaii, and how is it different or similar to what you've seen like maybe on the continent and other places? How can we apply those leadership, different concepts of leadership into our ohana and where we are?
That's the question.
That is my question.
That's the key question.
It's a big question, Alita. Wow, we could have a whole session on that.
Yeah.
I moved back to Hawaii and I worked with low-income families on the Waianae coast. I was leading a self-help housing project, and I spent Saturdays and with the family, sometimes Sundays, all day, pounding nails in. And I interviewed a lot of the families. And I grew up in Hawaii Kai, and I went to Punahou. And I remember being warned not to go to Waianae. They're going to beat you up, you haole boy.
That's right.
And I never felt more aloha than I did standing side by side on a ladder with people whose lives were very different from mine. And we found out our lives had a lot in common. We cared about our children and our families. But I do believe, Alita, you're right, that leadership in Hawaii must be grounded in a respect, love, and understanding of the incredible indigenous culture that the Native Hawaiians have built over 1,000 years. And Manu Aluli Meyer, who was one of my high school classmates, wrote a PhD thesis in Harvard about Hawaiian names of ways of knowing that I think you can still get if you go to her sister Maile's bookstore. And I would urge everybody to read that because it's a great way of grounding ourselves in Hawaiian ways of knowing and thinking. And it's more relational with our ancestors, with the Aina. I'm not telling you anything you don't already know. And I'm not presuming to know very much because I'm not Hawaiian. But I hope that more than anything else in the work that I've done, I've tried to understand how to better be a steward and a guest of this special place by understanding as deeply as I can indigenous wisdom and leadership. And I brought into that my work with indigenous peoples in the Philippines as well. It's been a joy and it's been a huge learning journey for me.
Okay, Lila, let's take your last question and
Thank
then we'll
you.
wind up this section. Thanks, Terry. Hanging
Thank
in there
you.
with us.
Thank you. And it's always serendipitous to be on screen with you, Benson, because my question was building from
I know.
Alita's. You know that, right?
Yep.
Terry, thank you, bud. Building on what you're saying and understanding the indigenous culture. I went to Punahou too, and we were never told that the Punahou PTA overthrew the Queen. And so, it wasn't until I went to Molokai as the vice principal there and got to be hanai'd by the community that I really understood not only the history, but the feeling of aloha. I always had it. So my question to you is, we have aloha. It's just everyone has aloha. It's just in various degrees of exposure, let's say, or revelation. What thoughts do you have, especially for non-Hawaiians and Rotarians, right? The Rotarian four-way test is aloha. It's about being a kako, right? That's a kako thing. It's about alakai, being a guide, not necessarily the leader or the mentor. Everything that we talk about in Rotary is founded or can emanate from Hawaiian values. So my question is, what thoughts do you have for those folks, our colleagues who are not Native Hawaiian like you and I, to be more comfortable using the language, integrating the concepts, and really living who we are in Hawaii without embarrassment or without guilt or any of that?
I guess I'll give you a 30 to 60 second answer, Lila.
Sorry, I'm sorry.
Part of it is what Tommy Ka'ulukui taught me, who's one of my mentors in leadership. He said, know your mountains, know your stream, know your ahupua'a, find out how those places and spaces were used over the centuries, find kupuna in your region who can teach you, and commit to having an open heart. And I think the other thing is that aloha is an action verb. When you talk to Pono Shim about aloha, and he waxes so eloquent about this, There's nothing soft or weak-spined about aloha at all. It's an incredible strength for us when we understand it and we use it. So that's the short answer, Lila.
It's
But
the
it's
exploration.
it's hard when you're new in Hawaii. And I've just found if we as non-Hawaiians take one step forward in curiosity and desire to understand and connect, we are embraced with open arms by those people of saying, I've only been waiting for you to ask, and I will give if you just ask for understanding. There's joy in that.
Thank you, Terry.
Terry, thanks a lot. And you know, that's a great segue because the next segment we're going to talk about is Native Hawaiian culture and how it intersects with Rotary. So I'm gonna do that. But let's have a big effort. Terry, way to bring it on a Saturday morning, man. That's really awesome. Okay, so hey, before I go into this next segment, I would just want to show you a picture. So look at behind me at this greenhouse. All right, let me show you this picture of what it looked like before we renovate it. So this was a tree that was growing out of the roof behind me, right? So we had a little tree. Well, it wasn't little, but it started as a little tree. And then it found its way like trees do, right? It goes to wherever the light is, and then it worked its way through a crack in the ceiling and then just destroyed it. So this guy that you see right here, that is a Rotarian. That's Justin Burials, right? He's in our club, Rotary Club of South Hilo. So they lowered him down on a crane. He connected the crane to this tree, and then he rappelled down from there, cut the tree off, and then they lifted it. Let me see if I can get the next picture in here. No, I don't think I can do it. But at any rate, that's a tremendous thing that he did, and it's just kind of the testament to how things can really go, when Rotarians get together. So this was a great segue into the next little section that I want to talk about. And it's just really kind of a conversation, and some of you kind of heard me talk about this, is that, I was raised in a family where my grandmother was pure Hawaiian, my mother's pure Hawaiian, and then my dad's Filipino from the Philippines. And so it was kind of comical because they kind of like argue with each other in their native language. And, nobody had their feelings hurt because nobody understood what each other was saying. But, excuse me, but what I began to understand on my block, okay, so we had Portuguese family, Japanese family, Korean families. I mean, we had them all, Chinese, we had them all just in our block. We had military family across the street. And what we see in all indigenous cultures, and especially in the Native Hawaiian culture, there are three things that guide all of the cultures. And if you guys are familiar with, Filipino culture, Korean, whatever, they're all similar in this regard. So here's the three things, right? It's respect, it's responsibility, and it's love. Those three things, right? So in the Hawaiian culture, this is what my grandmother taught us, right? The first thing is ho'ihi, and ho'ihi is respect, right? And her message to all of us growing up was that if you don't have that, you don't have anything, because respect is the guiding light that basically it determines how you behave, is respect. Okay, and then right in there, along with that, is we talked about aloha, right? And aloha, like Terry was saying about what Pono Shim says about aloha, it's a very, very powerful thing. And if you want to break it down even further, there's a kumu in Kaneohe, many of you know him, Kawai Kapu Okalani Hewitt, right? And so what he talks about when he talks about aloha, he talks about another concept that is connected to it, and the word is pilina, Pilina, pilina. And if you're familiar with Hawaiian culture, pilina means connection, the connection to all things. And so aloha actually is connected to this pilina, so that you have aloha in your heart and you're connected to the land. You have connection to relationships, and the Hawaiians believe that it is this pilina, that my grandmother used that word frequently, that is the fabric of how your life is connected. So you can have all of these ideas, but if you don't have this pilina that connects you to your family, connects you to the land in which you live, connects you to the relations, to the organizations that you're part of, no more nothing. She used to always say, you know, you don't have it. And then the other thing is Kuleana. Now, a lot of people understand Kuleana as being responsibility. But in Hawaiian, Kuleana can mean many things, right? It can mean ownership, it can mean privilege, it can mean right? So what I was taught from my kupuna is that Kuleana is not just responsibility, but it's the ownership of responsibility. That not only do you have that responsibility, you own it, and you're responsible for that responsibility. I know that's kind of crazy, and maybe it doesn't make sense, but when I became a Rotarian and I started hearing some of the terms, and especially the four-way test, a lot of the things that came back to me were things that I was taught as a child. So one of the things that my grandmother said very frequently is this term. It's hana me kapono. Hana me kapono. Hana me kapono. And hana me kapono means do it right. To do it right, right? Hana me kapono means that you tell the truth all the time. Hana me kapono means that it is that it's fair to all of those concerned, right? So I would stand next to my sister because my sister got me into Rotary, and when we would recite the four-way test at the end of every meeting, one time she told me, you know, that's Hana me kapono. that is our grandma's thing to do it right, right? And then we go to the next one, right? So will it build goodwill and better friendships? So when my grandmother was really a big one on relationships, right? So one of the things that she always used to say, excuse me, ho'opili mau. So ho'opili mau means friendships forever or relationship forever, right? So that's the equivalent of the BFF, your best friend forever. Ho'opili mau is the Hawaiian version of that. So her whole thing is like, okay, if you look at a relationship and it's ho'opili mau, this relationship is going to last forever. It's always going to be beneficial to them. Okay, it's always going to build goodwill, right, for everybody, right? So one of the things, when my grandparents, they lived in a really remote area in East Molokai, and Lila's familiar with this place. So during the holidays, they didn't have much money, right? So what they would do is go out and fish, and then they bring the fish in, and then they would, wrap them up in a newspaper or whatever, and they would just take them through the neighborhood and give them to people, and that was kind of their present to everybody. But my grandfather, who was a fisherman, whenever he caught fish, all right, he kept some for himself, and the rest of it he would give away. And he would give away because those relationships were ho'opili mau to him. They were important. And so if you have important relationships like that, you hana me kapono, right? You have to work at it. You don't just say, okay, well, hey, you're my best friend. No, you actually have to do something to show that. And then the last thing is that my grandmother was a deeply religious person. So every night before she went to bed, she would come out into the living room, and there was just all us kids in there, and she turned the TV off, and she would say the Lord's Prayer in Hawaiian. So she would say epuli kako, right? So she would come into the room and she would say epuli kako, which means let's pray. And so those of you who go to baby luau's, or any kind of Hawaiian event, it usually starts with a prayer, right? So epuli kako. But the other way that she would use it is that when she would come out into the yard, and we had a pretty big yard, right? She'd say, "E kokua kako, let's all work. Let's all work." And so, somebody mentioned today, or Lila talked about, it's a kako thing. So kako means us, all of us, including me, kako. So what we saw and what I've seen and experienced, like the people that are behind me working, it's super hot out here today too. So I mean, the shade is great. They're a kuakako. And that is one of the principles about Rotary. So is it beneficial to all concerned? So if we e kua kako, then it is always beneficial to everyone that's concerned. So I tell you this little mo'olelo, this story, because if all of us think back to the environment in which we were raised, wherever it was, you know, if it's here, if it's in the Philippines, if it's Des Moines, Iowa, there were certain things that were done within your family that created a culture for that family. All right. And then it launched you into your childhood and then your adulthood and to whatever. So the reason why culture is important is because every club has a culture. Every club has a culture. And a culture is the way in which you do things, your behavior, all right? But it's based upon whatever it is you believe, all right? And a lot of that was determined for you or by you as children. So like right now in our club, it's been a long couple of years, like most clubs, right? And we're trying to figure out a way to bring it back together. And part of it is that we have to reestablish our culture, reestablish, the habits that our culture has, that our club has. We have to reestablish all the, procedures, things that we used to do that we couldn't do because, we're online. But now we can do them because we're going to start coming back and we're going to start doing that in person. So that culture, our culture is super important. And especially for us who live here in Hawaii, that it surrounds us. It's like my granddaughter's name is Pohai Kealoha. I named her that, right? And that's surrounded by love. And so we Rotarians in Hawaii, like I always feel like this, right? There's Rotary, and then there's Rotary in Hawaii. Okay, because we're at a different level. I mean, it's not like we're superior or anything, but we're at a different level simply because we have that cultural base in which helps us to determine the way we act, the way we interact, the way we carry ourselves. So great. It's great to be in Rotary, but it's even better to be a Rotarian in Hawaii. So Lila, do you have your hand up? Did you want to say something or add something onto that? So that is the end of my little session right there. So go ahead. If anybody wants to make any comments, ask any questions, be glad to field them.
I'm sorry, Benson. No, I just didn't know how to take it away. Take the handle.
Okay. All right. No problem.
Thank you.
Ideas? Any thoughts? Anybody want to add anything to that? Any comments about that?
I just, this is Rick. I just messaged you. I went to Terry. Sorry, I went to Terry and everybody. No, I'm thinking in Ryla, so you're going to do the opening on Friday, right? And then on Saturday, I'm locking you in here. I'm thinking just what you just explained there. If we could tailor that to the youth that are participating and leave them on Friday with the thought of how are they already doing this, or where would they like to go with this? And then on Saturday, we could kind of have them talk about that a little bit. Just so we're just starting out right away with that, with the youth, and then the chant that you're going to do as well. So I was texting it to you just separate, but I'll throw it in there here because it's such an important message for them to have.
No problem, Rick. I'm glad to do it. Anytime we have an opportunity to share and expand culture, and especially as it relates to Rotary, is really a great thing. So any other thoughts about that? Then I have one other little section I'm going to roll you guys through, and then of course I'm in charge of getting the lunches, so I got to get out of here because people are trying to look into me like, bro, the lunches.
Benson,
what's up with that? Kurt,
Benson,
what's up?
Just a short one. Just keep it short. Great. I think what you've done is, I have to be honest with you, you've given me a different perspective on Rotary in terms of being a Hawaiian in Hawaii, right? And it'd almost be like my grandmother and your grandmother were sisters, right?
Yeah, exactly.
In terms of what she tried to show us. And being the kids that we were, sometimes we didn't pay attention. It all became evident years and years later, yeah? And I'll just say one more thing, which is kind of contentious. I was involved for many, many years with this whole activist scenario. It wasn't with the mountain at that time. It was just about Hawaiians and land and et cetera, many, many years ago. So I was rubbing elbows with all the primary activists at that time. So I got a pretty good perspective in terms of their feelings and et cetera. And I think the one thing that stood out above all else was that there was not enough respect for the culture. And that was the one thing, and it still is to a certain degree today, that was the one thing that really irked the kapuna, yeah, that they were not being listened to. And that's something that we need to overcome. And I think through Rotary is probably a vehicle that can help out with that too. That's all I've got to say.
Yeah, that's right. If you want to piss off kapuna, all you got to do is disrespect them. I mean,
Yeah.
to them, that is the ultimate sin.
Your pal, man.
So, yeah, your pal. So Terry, I see you got your hand up, and then Alan, you got your hand up. So let's take some questions.
Vincent, I was just going to thank you for that. And I put it in the chat. I think if there was a way you can capture this, you're already going to talk with the RILA folks about this at Rick's request. But really just have somebody video you just saying again what you just said about your grandma and about how these concepts so relate. Kurt, you're right. I think this is something that every Rotarian in Hawaii needs to understand, and any prospective Rotarian does, because it just goes to show Rotary is not a foreign global McDonald's style franchise entity. It's actually deeply interwoven and fits within the indigenous values that make Hawaii so special. So just recapture it in either writing or a short video YouTube that we can put on the D5000 website.
Yeah, thanks, Terry. That's great. So I wanted to add a little snippet onto this because so I was saying, like, across the street from us were the Bradburys, right? And they were from Boston. The father was military, right? And so the son, Danny, who was my age, would kind of come over, and you know, obviously that time when we were in school was you know, 6th or 7th grade. He got a lot of heat, man, because he was just this big, huge holiday guy from the mainland, right? So you know, all the mokes were kind of picking on him. So he started to kind of get this complex about, oh, you know, you guys hate Hawaiians and all that, right? And so so one day, now my grandma, who doesn't, well, she did speak English, but she refused to speak because she felt like all of her power was taken away if she had to speak English. So one day, Danny's over there. We're in 6th grade, right? And so he's talking to me, right? My grandma's over there. She's weaving lauhala hat, right? And he's saying, you know, how come you guys Hawaiians, you guys hate us? Da, 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 da. And so my grandma stopped. She put her hat down, and she went over those 3 things with him. She basically told him, if you have respect, if you're responsible and you understand aloha, that's all you need. Hawaiian is not about, you know, how much cocoa, what's your blood quantum. It's about if you're respectful, responsible, and you understand and you practice aloha, that's it. And she told him that. I mean, when I was a kid, I'm like, okay, grandma, shut up already, because, you know, this is my friend over here. Because, you know, when you're a kid, you don't want to really hear from your grandma. But man, I mean, I flashed on that. I connected with him on Facebook like 50 years later, and he was telling me that story. He's like, God, I remember I was sitting in there and your grandma told me that. So just to kind of address your concern about, like, okay, so if you're Haole and you're not from here, you know, can you still be part of it? Yeah, my kai can. Respectful, be respectful. Okay, you know, understand aloha, and then understand responsibility, and you got it. So I think. So, okay, so I'm gonna take one more question from Alan over here. Alan.
Hey, aloha, Benson. And mahalo for all the mo'olelo for your past. I really appreciate it. Good stories. I was very fortunate to establish a relationship with someone from Waianae, and I learned a lot. I learned a lot of not just the culture or the practices or the values or anything, but so much about the spirit of the Hawaiian people. And the other day I was on a webinar, and I think his name is Greg Chun. He says something about you don't have. You were on that thing. Same one.
I was on that with you. Greg's my classmate for Korea. Awesome.
What really grabbed me is that he said you don't have to be responsible for what happened in the past, but you can sure be responsible for the choices and decisions you make from today. From today on. And that really grabbed me in the sense that it grounded you into where and what your responsibilities are today. And it comes from, I've heard that so much from my Hawaiian friend. And I thought, wow, we need to spend a lot more time merging and integrating these thoughts, even to small little things that I've been kicking around for 10 years now about the name restoration. Someday we're all going to be calling Coconut Island Mokuola instead of Coconut Island. It drives me crazy that they would change the name to Coconut Island when it doesn't have any meaning. But it goes further than that. All these other places in Hawaii that we have adopted names for people because they were presidents or famous or whatever. But they have names that describe what that area was. And I think we lost that. So anyway, those are just my thoughts, Benson. Mahalo.
Benson, I just got a real fast one here, fast on the story. What Alan just said was great. But anyway, when commitment school time, when came Easter vacation or Christmas, sometimes you went home with some of your classmates. And one Easter, I went back to Kauai with a friend of mine. His name was Alan Kauai, and had a great time there. But anyway, when we were leaving the house, his grandmother walked up to me, and she gave me the hug. She was very, very Hawaiian in everything she did, thought, and said. And she shook my hand. And when she shook my hand, she passed a $5 bill into my hand. Now, this is 1962 or something like $5 is big money. And when we got back to Kamehameha, I didn't know what to do with that $5. Eventually I did. But anyway, about 30 years later, no, it was more than that. It was actually the day that Alan Kauai died. And before he died, he was talking to another friend of mine, Peter Kamano, and he told Peter Kamano this story. He said, Curtis never knew that my grandmother gave the $5 to him. She would normally give it to me. He could never understand that. But it was the aloha. It was, I was a friend of her grandson. I was a guest in the house. So even if it was the last bowl of rice, I would have gotten it. Yeah. So that's my story.
Yeah. All right. Mahalo, Kurt, as always. So I'm going to wind up over here the last a few minutes. So about 3 years ago, so some of you know, I mean, we all should know, right? That about 5 years ago, Rotary came up with this new vision statement, right? And so their vision statement was basically, we see a world where people unite, right, and take action to create lasting change in our communities across the globe and within ourselves. That was their new vision statement. And so off of that came 4 strategic priorities, right? And we've been working with this, man. I mean, we're in the 3rd year of a 5-year program, and it's about expanding our reach. It's about increasing our impact. It's about enhancing participant engagement, and it's about increasing our ability to adapt. Those 4 things is the direction Rotary wanted to go. All right. So about 2 years ago, year and a half ago, Win Shoneman, who was the DG at that time, he said, do you think you could translate those into Hawaiian for us? And then I said, yeah, but if you don't know Hawaiian, then those words are not going to mean anything. I said, okay, I tell you what, let me just tell you what what those mean in terms of the culture, right? So I was saying, so we're talking about expanding our reach. I said, now you realize, right, that the Hawaiians are probably the foremost, like, world-renowned people who expand their reach, because they got into these double hull canoes and they went out thousands of miles into the ocean and they had no idea what was out there. All right. And you know why they did that? They did that because they're curious. They did that because they saw evidence of the birds that would fly out and wouldn't come back for months. They surmised something is out there, right? So they got in these canoes and they went out there, and most of them knew they were never going to come back. They were either going to perish at sea or they were going to find a new land, right? So that, to me, is the epitome of expand your reach. So if you wanted to go beyond, where you are, get out of your comfort zone, all you got to do is take a look at how the Hawaiians handled expand your reach. So, and then the other one is the increasing impact, right? So Kuleana is really, it's really connected to impact. And the reason why Rotary came up with increase your impact, that was off of polio. So, we had done a huge job throughout the world just demolishing polio, right? And so they wanted to, like, okay, so that was a huge impact on the world. So what else can we do? What kind of other project could we do that could increase our impact like we did in polio? And so they're putting it out to all of us as Rotarians, like, all right, how can we do that? And the way the Hawaiians looked at that, the Hawaiians look at increasing impact by increasing your involvement, your kuleana. Like my grandfather, when we'd ask him about weather, in his mind, there's no such thing as weather, right? So it's whatever nature gives you, right? So the day is sunny, you go fish, right? The day is rainy, or you're in the lo'i, so you're farming, right? So you do the most that you can with whatever it is that you're given. So that's the way we increase impact. And then the whole participant engagement piece, it's really about that kako thing, right? So it's a kokua kako. So that particular strategy was written so that people would engage people in their clubs that really kind of weren't doing, that were sort of stagnant in their clubs. And we all have people in our clubs that are like that, right? I mean, they're sort of on the roll, and maybe they pay their dues, but we don't really see them. They don't come to the meetings, all right? So how do we increase participant engagement? And that engagement is really about getting everybody to understand that it's a kako thing. It's all of us, right? So you can imagine, right? If we come out and my grandma says, okay, e kuku kako, we're all going to clean the yard. There's 8 of us. And I decide, nah, I'm not going to participate today. Oh, I could get licking. Doing that. So you just don't say that, right? Because that would be disrespectful. And then the last thing, right, is increasing our ability to adapt. So in 1946, there was a humongous tsunami, right? Wiped out a bunch of the Big Island, but it also wiped out a lot of East Molokai. So my grandparents' house, which is sitting there in Puko'o, demolished, right? And so I have a picture of them in 1946 sitting on top of their house, right, in pieces. So, yeah, you were sad they lost everything. Okay, but my grandfather said, okay, we got to hold on more. We have to move on. Yeah, it's sad, it's tragic, we lost everything, but we have to hold on more. We have to go on. All right, so his reefs where he used to fish wiped out. Got to find another place to fish. All right, all the lo'i, his taro fields wiped out by the tsunami. Got to go replant them, start all over again. Right. So Hawaiians, I believe, like, what are the key people in the world in ability to adapt. So those 4 things are what really have allowed the Hawaiian culture to advance, centuries and generations. And that is the thing that's going to allow Rotary to advance as long as we understand what those things are and we can integrate them into the things that we do. So, all right. Any other comments? I'm gonna wind it up over here. It's about 10:30. So any comments, questions, anything anybody want to say? I know that was a lot. So there's a section that I'll get to later on about developing leadership within your club. So let me just put a tie on the whole leadership thing, right? So Rotary is the clubs. Rotary happens within your club. So Rotary isn't this big sort of concept out there. It's your club, all right? And so the 35,000 clubs that are out there in over 200 countries that, 1.2 million Rotarians out there, the basis of Rotary is within your club. So club leadership is super important. So think about this for a second, all right? No club leadership, no club, no Rotary. It's pretty simple, right? So if you've got the kind of club, and some clubs are like this, where nobody wants to be the president, nobody wants to be the leader, nobody wants to be in charge of anything, right? So you can only take that for so long before your club's going to fold. So if we don't have leadership within our clubs, and our clubs fold, Rotary goes with us. So that's why the development of leadership, and we started this 4-part series, was really to reach out to all Rotarians in our district and say, look, everybody, just like Rick said, right? Everybody is a leader in Rotary, all right? Maybe you just don't know that, or maybe you just haven't done anything to develop that. But that leadership at the club level is critical. And if we don't either find leaders or develop that, then our club system is really going to deteriorate. The good news is that we have a lot of good leaders. On this call today, there's 34 of us on the call today, which is really good news for District 5000. So there's a lot of opportunity now. We've developed training so that a person that wants to aspire to be club president, now they have a lot of support. A lot of people that are willing to help nurture and mentor. I think Kurt brought up the whole mentorship issue, mentor young leaders. And so we want to make Rotary a place where people will come to, because they not only want to learn leadership, but they want to participate in a leadership, in a servant type of leadership where everybody benefits from that. So. Okay, man. So that is my sermon for today. We'll pass the hat around, make your check out to BENSONMETINA. Other than that, if anybody has any comments, any more questions, we'll wrap it up for today. It's really good to see faces on the call today. And, when I see all the cameras come on at the end, yeah. Yes, I teach a course where you have to keep your camera on, because we have to believe you're actually there. So, all right, gang. Well, hey, that's it for November 6th. So appreciate you guys being here. Terry, thanks for joining us today. Really critical, the stuff that you laid out. When I see participation like this, it gives me kind of like great hope and enthusiasm, not just for all of us, but for Rotary in general. So I'll say. Let's see. Here's I'll give you a little Hawaiian goodbye. So people say aloha, mahalo, mahalo nui loa, no'u no ka haole, no'u no me ka haole. It is my pleasure. No'u no me ka haole. It is my pleasure, or this makes me very happy. Okay. So that my grandma used to say that whenever I would leave, for the day. Yeah, she would oh, good. I'm so happy that you're leaving for today. No, make a haole. Thank you for putting that in the chat. So we'll see you guys later. Aloha, no, everybody. Yeah. No, make a haole. Okay, aloha.
No.
Mahalo
Thanks,
piha.
Benson.
Mahalo piha. That's a good
Mahalo
one.
to
That's another
everyone.
good one. Yeah, mahalo piha.
Thank
Okay,
you,
gang.
Benson. We
And
love
aloha
you. We love
kako.
you.
All right.
Have a
Aloha,
great
no,
weekend.
everybody.
Aloha. Thank you, Terry.
Everyone.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Terry. Let me stop the recording. Okay.
Aloha.
Okay.
Hey, Ben.